So I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Somebody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any changes? Additions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
What do we have up there for members?
You've got nobody online.
Nobody online,
Yeah.
okay,
I just saw Len pull in.
okay. All right, public input. Have any public input? Anybody? Okay. All right, so we will not discuss no input. Okay. Motion to approve the minutes from 5/21/25. I think I had one minor little change. I can find it. Just a repeated word, so it wasn't anything fancy. Oh, gosh, I had it written, but then deleted that copy of it.
We can look for that. if
Yeah,
that's-
there was just one word that, one correction.
If
Hey, Len.
everybody's comfortable with us tracking down a repeated word and fixing that, I think we can go with that.
Okay.
So, do we
Did I
need
get a motion to
No,
approve?
not yet.
Oh, can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Second. Okay, so we are going to make that, I'm going to find that change and let her know what it is. Okay, any other discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Right.
No, abstain from that.
Okay,
Technically, since
Dave.
I wasn't here.
David's abstaining.
I'll abstain since I just got here.
Okay.
For the minutes?
Yeah.
Okey dokey. All right, breakfast and lunch meal pricing for adults.
Okay,
Is
that's
that you?
one that folks may not have had a lot of time to look at. The great news is there's no proposed change. Stan talked to our food service provider. We recently renewed our contract with that provider a couple of meetings ago. And working with K-12 by Elior, our provider, they believe that they can keep doing what they need to do with no price increase. The cost for the meals is lower than the price charged. So there is room there for them to do what they need to do. We were a little surprised with no change, but we're pleased with no change. So we'd ask the board for a motion to accept the proposed adult meal pricing for FY26.
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed adult meal pricing for the upcoming school year.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Awesome, thank you.
Did a clarifying question, Brian. I'm
Yep.
assuming if a student is 18 years old but is enrolled in the school, they
That's-
pay
yeah,
the student, it's free. It's-
Correct.
that's- okay.
Good
Assumed,
clarification.
but wasn't sure.
Yeah, good question.
So next, we have the heating oil and propane bids. I believe that
Those were
those
sent
are sent out.
a fair bit later even today, so those are ones that folks may not have seen.
Good that we're-
I'm going to go ahead and throw those on the screen
Okay, thank
now, just so that we have those. So give me a second. Okay. So bids were due today, and that's why we have those coming in.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so we are looking at propane bids first. Propane bid, we really only have one, and that's because several years back, we went with Irving. Irving installed the tanks. So there's an incentive for us to continue using Irving, because if we use a different provider, we then have to buy the tanks. So not fiscally very feasible. At the time when we entered into this agreement, oh gosh, maybe Did Stan say what year? Yeah, 2019. In 2019, we had a conversation with the board around, are we comfortable with this arrangement? Or should we start to budget for the tanks, to purchase the tanks and have them installed ourselves so that we have the freedom of going with different vendors? At that time, it was decided that it made more fiscal sense to allow the vendor to install the tanks. So the board could surely decide something different tonight, but we would recommend that the board accept the bid from Irving Energy for propane.
Okay, someone like to make a motion to accept that bid?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second?
Can you,
Any questions or comments? Okay,
Yeah,
Dave?
can you state the terms of the bid?
Yep, and
Because
sorry, I know
can't
up
read
there
it.
it's a little hard to see. Just trying to make that a little bigger. So total cost, the bid is for $1.43 per gallon. So the total cost for the 25,000 gallons of propane would be $35,925. We've budgeted a little bit more than that, so there is some savings there, which is nice. We'll talk about some of that savings later tonight, actually.
Is that for, does every single school have a tank?
No, not every school uses propane.
Okay.
I have a question. And so you mentioned about the cost of renting the tanks. Is that figured into the price per gallon?
Correct. This price per gallon is all we need to pay. There's no additional cost. If we went with a different vendor, we would have a large additional cost because we would have to purchase the tanks from Irving.
The problem with purchasing the tanks is
Yep.
then you become responsible
Yes,
for
correct.
you have to have them
maintaining,
inspected.
inspecting.
Correct.
That's a whole,
Then how many years down the road, maybe it's 10 years, but 10 years down the road, we have to deal with it too. So, yeah. Rich?
Just clarification on the savings, so that the budget is based on normal temperatures? I mean, what's it, past use?
So budget is based on two things, past use and past price. And then Stan is always going to be reasonable and add 5% or something like that. So we always have a little bit of wiggle room.
Because that's more than a quarter of the
It's a
cost for savings. That's
It's
huge
a good
savings.
savings. It's a good savings. We'll talk about diesel in a little bit, and will we have that savings at the end of the year? Not necessarily. But at this point in time, that's a nice savings.
What was the cost last year?
I
Or
don't
do you
know. I don't know,
And
Dave,
the-
sorry.
Total cost, that's just a projection based on past use, right? It's not a,
And the price that they're getting per
Yeah,
gallon, which is set.
We will likely purchase all of that. So it's
could it be
unlikely.
more, I'm asking though?
What's that?
If it's a really cold winter, are you gonna spend 50% more than that?
It could possibly be. I think that's a pretty safe estimate based on usage, though. So, yeah. Might we need to spend some of that down the road? Yes. Would we end up spending all of it on propane? Probably not.
Which school uses propane?
Oh, good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know.
Does Mill River?
No, Mill River we have our oil boiler and our wood chip boiler at Mill River.
And Kitchen doesn't use it?
I don't believe so.
Do we
I don't believe
do we
so.
know what,
I could be wrong in that, Rich, but I don't believe
I
so.
think Wallingford Elementary uses propane.
oh, it does, I think you're right.
Honestly don't know, but if you know that, I trust you
I've
guys.
seen the truck pull up there, I think you're,
Well, I know they have an old oil tank that's discontinued, so they gotta be
I
burning
think I've seen
something.
the trucks there, actually.
And Clarendon may as well. I believe we did some modernization work at Clarendon, so it may be Clarendon and Wallingford, maybe.
Do
Don't
we-
quote me on that, though.
Do we know, I don't use propane in my home. Do we know what the current market rate is
That's a very good price.
outside of
actually.
Irving? I mean, I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
that purchasing tanks and then incurring the risk of maintaining them is necessarily a good idea. But if this is significantly above the current market price, it might be worth investigating that.
If it were significantly above the market price, Stan would have been asking some questions.
Fair enough.
I can
So I-
speak to that. That's a very good price.
Yeah.
That's
I
getting.
think that's
a-
less than I'm paying at
Fair.
home.
much,
Sure.
I'm sure it is.
I know that-
I don't
Because we're
know.
buying so much.
A household,
Like the
if you, if you're buying for your household,
Yeah.
because we
Okay, it's a good
do,
price then, sure.
it's almost $5 a gallon.
Boy.
Yeah, if you don't own the tank, and if you do own the tank, it's over $2 a gallon. It's it's very expensive. So this is actually, that caught my, that's a great price.
Any other
Good to know.
questions about the propane bid? Did we have a motion?
We have a
did.
motion.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes.
all in favor?
Okay, fantastic. So, let me bring up the next one for you. Okay, this one's got two parts. So let's focus on first part of number 2, fuel oil. So this is going to be, when I say we have oil boiler here at Mill River, we're going to be talking about Tinmouth and Shrewsbury oil boilers as well.
Wallingford, it looks like, too.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've seen
yep.
propane trucks there, so it's strange.
So Tinmouth has heat pumps and oil. Wallingford has dual heat as well. So Shrewsbury, Tinmouth, Wallingford, and the high school. We had 3 bids. We had Irving, or sorry, 2 bids here. We've got Champlain Valley and we've got Irving. And if you look at the totals of those, you'll notice that they're very close. And you'll also notice that Irving is a little bit better. You're looking at 46,000 and 45,000. We are recommending that the board go with Champlain Valley based on prior experience with them. We have worked through a lot of challenging situations with them, and they have been phenomenal. So our recommendation would be, when we're talking about a $1,000 difference on a $45,000 purchase, that it's not worth going with a vendor who we don't have that same experience with.
It's not even that much, it's $300. It's
So we would ask for a motion to, our recommendation, accept the bid from Champlain Valley for number 2 fuel oil.
so
Rich?
moved.
Okay,
Second.
second. All right, any questions or conversation?
Just as we're talking
Yeah.
about oil and Shrewsbury, I was
Yep.
just curious, because I know there was a lot of stuff last year. Is this,
Yep.
well, just like, where are we at for this year with the heating with Shrewsbury?
Yep. So the heating system, we had a leak in a boiler that had to get replaced, which was challenging because we were doing that work during winter. We also have so that's been sorted, and they've been running on that oil system since we figured that out. We've also had a plan in place where we've been working to put heat pumps in. So Shrewsbury will be dual heat source next year. That should be happening over the summer. So we'll have heat pumps figured out, and we'll have oil as a backup, and for the very cold days, because the heat pumps are fantastic till you start getting down to 0 degrees or lower. So, Carol?
Will the heat pumps affect the electric bills?
Yes, our electric bills will go up. Our fuel oil bills will go down.
Okay.
So there'll be a little bit of a trade-off there.
Generally,
The-
the benefit outweighs the cost, though.
Yeah, and when you hit seasons like, the whole spring, where it hasn't wanted to really warm up, when it's in the 40s, those heat pumps are incredibly efficient. Burning oil when it's in the 40s is not a really good return on your cost. Using the heat pumps when it's in the 40s is phenomenal. And we'll also have the added benefit of some air conditioning in the summers, which have consistently been more humid. The humidity has been causing challenges at our buildings. The humidity makes them harder to keep sanitary, basically. So that'll, maybe cost a little more in electricity, but the upkeep to our building, it should save some money
Well,
on
I
that.
guess I was
too.
just wondering if that was accounted for in the budget when,
We will likely not use as much fuel oil as we anticipate, but we don't know that yet, so we don't want to under budget, hoping that the heat pumps will, So we'll have a year where we have a little bit of a buffer, and then when we do the budget next budget season, Stan will likely drop these numbers.
or raise the
It
electric?
will, yeah,
All right,
when,
well,
when we get into maybe November, Stan might be comfortable saying we can now look at some usage and we have a good sense of where things are going during budget season. But we
Okay.
don't want to cut it too close and shortchange because you never know what's going to happen.
I had a question.
Yep.
So do any of the schools in our school district have any solar at all?
Mill River has solar that was installed maybe about 5 or so years ago. Shrewsbury's had it for a long time. Wallingford's had it for a long
Okay,
time.
so we're getting solar credits.
Yeah, we
So
do.
So those heat pumps are being at least partially?
Some is offset, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that has been exercised?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Rich?
Tell me if this is out of
Mm.
line. I know we're talking about the first bid here.
Yeah.
Just kind of reading ahead, the
Yeah.
second bid you're recommending
Yeah.
we go with Irvin, and I'm wondering, just the, if our logic
Yep.
is the service and the partnership that we've had with
Yep.
one.
We have not had issues with Irving and propane. Is that kind of?
No,
what you-
we're not talking about propane, I'm talking about the next.
Yeah,
there's a-
hold that thought, hold that thought.
Hold that thought, okay,
Because actually, I think there's more to the conversation after talking with Tim today.
okay,
So yeah, we'll talk about that.
thank you.
okay, any more conversation about Champlain Valley as our number 2 fuel vendor? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
And now you're going to do,
Yeah, so diesel, diesel is interesting because you can see the bids. I know that's really tiny there. You're looking at 2 different, price indexes, and you're talking about adding 35 cents or 36 cents to those price indexes. And you're coming up with rates that are pretty close to each other, $2.59 per gallon versus $2.52 per gallon. Last year, we had a big enough difference that you'll notice this is not a fixed price bid. Nobody wants to give us a fixed price bid anymore. These are variable price bids. So all we're doing here is locking in that differential, that 35 cents or 36 cents added onto those indexes. Last year, when we brought this to the board, we had a difference of about 15 cents added versus 30 cents added. At that point in time, it made sense to go with one vendor for their variable price because there was likely to be savings. That vendor last year was Champlain Valley because it was a reasonable savings that we could predict. Actually, talking to Tim today, he doesn't feel that there is much value in going with either vendor at this point. We just filled up our diesel tank. So we're in really good shape, and we're going to do a couple of bus runs, and it'll be summer. So we're going to go into the year pretty much topped off for diesel. We won't need to get diesel until later into the fall, and it seems reasonable to wait, and then at that point in time, get quotes from vendors and see if there is a big enough difference to go with one vendor over another vendor. So
Diesel
our-
usage seems to be more predictable too. You're going to use whatever, more or less the same amount every day, so you know when it's getting low, you have
Yeah.
10 more days. or
Yeah,
whatever.
your temperature fluctuations don't throw a wrench in it. You know your routes and you're running your routes. If anything, we're running a little fewer miles than anticipated. We're probably not
Consolidated
running
routes.
more. Yeah.
Dave?
Dave?
So there's 2 different racks here.
Yep.
And do those rack prices tend to be
The-
different?
There's not a substantial enough difference that Tim wants to lock a price in at this point. So his recommendation would be, let's wait and we'll come back in the fall with bids when we need to explore it. At this point, he feels that we shouldn't do anything.
So no action necessary.
Yeah.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, by consensus.
Okay. And we had no motion on that,
No,
right?
no
Yeah.
motion.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay. Support staff master agreement ratification and non-union contracts. Did everybody got a copy of the contract? It was mailed to everybody. And then the list of non-contract employees. Okay.
And I would recommend let's tackle the master agreement first.
Okay. All right, and do we just need a motion to approve it?
Yep, motion to ratify the master agreement.
Okay,
With whom?
What's that?
with
Support
support staff.
I know that, but
Yep.
I just think that needs to be.
Well,
Yep.
Said.
all right.
So is that the employment contract support staff?
Yes.
So,
This right here.
yeah.
So the master agreement between the Mill River Unified Union School District and the Mill River Unified Education Association Support Staff Unit.
Who would like to make that motion to,
I will make the motion that we ratify
Thank
the
you,
employment
Sarah.
contract with.
and a second?
I think I have it.
Lenny, any feedback, comments,
Do you want to
discussion?
share a little, Josh?
I just want to reiterate, I mentioned this at the last meeting of just, I think we had a really productive set of meetings, and I think both parties, and I hate to speak for the other party, but it felt like both parties were happy with like how the process worked out and the end results that, we all could benefit from.
And I would echo that. I feel like worked very well with the association's negotiating team, and we appreciated everything they brought to the table and the dialogue. It was very, very professional, and we appreciated working with them.
And I think, there was a strong understanding between all the parties of where we were as the district and where we could go. And I think this master agreement recognizes that.
Great. Well, thanks to the
Kudos,
members
yeah.
of the committee for working on that, negotiations. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? All in favor? Okay,
Okay, awesome.
contract approved.
So
None.
second piece of that would be non-union contracts. So I had a little cover sheet there that explained who those non-union folks are. And that would be bus drivers, executive admin, administrative assistants, administrative assistant, Medicaid clerk, accounts payable, payroll, benefits, IT staff, transportation maintenance coordinator, and assistant business manager. So those are all folks who do not qualify, do not fall under the support staff unit master agreement or the teacher unit master agreement, or the bucket of certified administrators, basically, so our administrative team. Traditionally, we had asked for the board to approve a salary increase that is in keeping with what we negotiate for the support staff master agreement, because that would be the master agreement that would most closely align with these job categories. It's just that these categories are exempt from union eligibility due to the nature of the work that they do, if that makes sense. So we would ask that the board approve a salary increase of 4.5% for FY26 for these non-union eligible support staff positions.
Somebody? Josh? Okay.
Second.
Who's second?
Second.
Matt? Okay, discussion?
For clarification, so I think it was last year we had to catch
Yeah.
people up because they were falling in this netherworld. So this covers all of those people
Yes.
so that they're staying in line, so a
Yes,
year or two,
absolutely.
we don't have to catch them up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Would the expectation be that, I saw the wage increase for fiscal year '27.
Yep.
For the support staff was a larger number. Would the expectation be that this would also go up?
That would be a
similar?
conversation, to have in the fall with Finance Committee building the budget. And if that's what the Finance Committee feels is appropriate, we can build that into the budget. When we had that conversation this year in Finance Committee in the fall, we built in the same amount for everybody. So what we negotiated with our support staff unit was largely tied to what was in the budget. So does it have to be? No.
I understand.
But
But
that's
there's an
conversation.
expectation,
That's a
probably.
conversation. And I think that is important that we do that with the Finance Committee in the fall, so that we know.
And just for the question that I asked, basically was that had happened in the past where like those two numbers weren't aligned, and then it was like, oh, these people are actually pretty far behind
Way
because they had
below, yeah.
missed a couple rounds of it. And so it's, you know, they are non-union, so I mean, it's, you can still have the conversation about it, you
Yeah,
know?
we are not tied to any number for next year for this group of folks. Yeah. Good questions.
This is just my ignorance. Are custodians union eligible?
Custodians are union. Yep. Good question.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Awesome, thank you.
All right, additional staffing for FY '26.
Okay, at our last finance meeting, we had discussed bringing to the full board options for what it would look like if we tried to use current staffing to better support student health needs, and then an option if we were to hire an additional support staff member. So what we worked on was a list of potential cuts that would get us the funding to hire that individual. So somebody on the board could make a motion to direct the administration for purposes of discussion.
I'll so move that. Yeah.
You got to decide what your motion's going to be.
I move to explore option 2.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, all right, discussion.
What contract does school nurses fall under
Well,
in
so,
this district?
so we've been talking about LPN, so licensed practical nurse would fall under support staff contract. School nurse would fall under the teacher unit.
So we're talking about.
So we're talking LPN, yeah.
So under
Yeah.
did we just approve the paraeducator contract, so. follow that.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
But it is built in that there's a stipend.
No, I understand. I was just curious because different bargaining units cover staff nurses differently.
Great.
Right.
Is this addressing the issue that came up for the one elementary student that needed the specialized?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Yes.
And the options are,
Yes.
we either hire that person or,
Or we look at our current staffing and we shift current staffing in a way that better supports.
gotcha.
And has that been explored?
Shifting current staffing?
Yes.
Yes, we're absolutely working with Coral to start sorting through what that looks like.
Okay, this is again, me just not still learning about our budget process.
Yep.
So, we do have a large surplus, though.
None that we can use.
None that we can use.
So here's the challenge. When we start the fiscal year with a budget and we work through that budget, any funding that we don't spend is unanticipated surplus. So things that we don't expect to happen. So that unanticipated surplus, two things historically have happened probably the last 10 years or so. One, we can put it on the ballot and we can say to the voters, would you approve us using this unanticipated surplus for building fund? In the past, we have done that for athletics too. And then the remainder of that unanticipated surplus goes and sits to the side. And we cannot use that funding for anything unless we have voter approval, except to use it to pay down taxes, basically give it back. So we put it on the ballot, or we set it to the side to use to lower taxes in future years. So at this point in time, we've put some funding in the building fund, and we have a bucket of surplus funding sitting to the side to use to pay down taxes. We don't have funding right now to use for additional things that have not been budgeted for. So what Stan was talking about at the finance meeting for the folks who were there was, to his knowledge, the board has never made an addition to a past budget without finding where the money's coming from, basically. So these were places where we could find the money. Several years back, the board had identified a need to add supply funding at all levels, but specifically at the high school level, because we haven't had funding to replace textbooks for a while. So the first item here that we mentioned, the $25,000, would be a 100% cut in that discretionary funding that Mill River has been, rotating through and using for different departments. So science department uses it one year, maybe they need new microscopes, that's a big cost. Maybe social studies uses it the next year, math uses it the next year.
Yeah, that 100% gave me pause, that's why I
Yeah.
wasn't, so
Well,
what?
To get to 70,000, it's hard.
Yeah,
So 25,000 there would be something that we've only had in the budget for a handful of years. And it would be something that we could easily not spend. The 35,000 would be a 10% freeze on all other budgets. So that would be every classroom teacher, say you get $350, you would pause on spending 35 of those dollars. Say your front office admin has maybe $10,000 of supply funding for the building for the year. They're going to pause on spending 1,000 of that. BJ might have $30,000 for devices. He's going to pause on spending 3,000 of that. So everything across the district, not just classroom teachers, but every supply line. The $6,000 would be bus driver training. We've had bus driver training in our budget for a handful of years. We came very close to somebody signing an agreement to become a bus driver with us, and we would pay for their training. Aside from that one near hit, we haven't had anybody interested in using that funding, so that's something that $6,000 we feel we could safely make that work. Oh, Jody's telling me we maybe have a sound problem.
So to be clear, are we discussing option 2 at this point? And our thoughts on it?
Ned, okay, we're good now.
Oh, we-
Oh, that's weird. Wonder what happened.
We had a motion and a second on it, yes?
Yeah, Ned made a motion that we explore making these cuts
Yep.
and post for an LPN. Sorry, last one, and then we'll keep going. $4,000 savings from fuel bids. So that was a safe number that, we need to keep some of that funding, because if it's a really cold winter, we haven't had a really cold one in a couple of years, but, 4,000 of that would be fairly safe to use at this point. Gray?
So I just want to understand if it looks like we have a choice here.
Yep.
One is to make these cuts and to hire a new person. The second, and this
Add a
is,
person to the budget.
right, and I'm remembering this whole conversation we had about the other possibility was that we could move some of the people around to get somebody that, is it Coral who's the head nurse?
No, Coral is student services, so she's going to oversee a lot of the support staff. Not every single support staff member, but probably 90%.
So, I'm sorry, who was the nurse that was speaking?
Amy.
Hi, I'm sorry. Anyway, your point was that you weren't comfortable with the person who was there at the time trying to bring them up to that level of training, but that there were other people within the district that perhaps could be.
I think Carol brought that up as an option, so
Yeah.
okay, speak to that. And I did reach out to Coral, and I did let her know what that would entail. I also do speak to the Board of Nursing and the Department of Health. I answered to all of them in addition to Mill River, and have consulted with both of them.
And I shared the
resources.
Board of Nursing communication you sent me, I shared with the board.
But going back to what I just want to make sure I was understanding this, that is also a possibility that we could do a personnel shuffle that would address the need of that student?
May I
Yeah.
speak to that?
Or can I,
But let's just be careful, we don't want to, I would rather talk about health needs of students rather than identifying one
Yeah.
student. We just need to be mindful and careful there.
I just to respond, because I was the one who suggested that, I noticed during personnel that we're hiring a paraeducator. I don't know where that paraeducator is going, but assuming that we have to hire another paraeducator because someone doesn't sign a contract or isn't coming, couldn't we focus that position on the need that we have, and then that person could be the para, because there is a para assigned to Shrewsbury, so we know that that position is there, and we just hire for that position.
And all of our schools have paraeducators assigned to them. All of our elementaries have a medical designee. So we have some people in place, we have some flexibility, and we can reassign paraeducators based on student need according to the terms of the master agreement.
Okay,
that's something, sorry, one more thing I'll say.
Yeah, go
That's
ahead.
something that happens typically, like, say you have a student move in mid-year and they have certain IEP needs, we'll move staff to support those needs.
Right.
You know, that's always an option. Sorry, Carol.
So Ned has made a motion regarding option 2, but is option 2 only going to be used if you're unable to,
No, if you approve us to do that right now, we will post for that position. If you want to explore another option and direct us to try, and then post a position if we're unsuccessful, we can do that. That's up to the board if you want to. The two options that we had talked about were hiring or not.
One second, Amy. Do any other board members have any?
Yeah, my
Discussion.
only concern, and it's just a concern in general, when positions get created and placed in the budget,
They've never.
they never go away. And so, my concern is if this is a need for right now, and it's not a need 3 years from now, is that position still going to be there? And I think that, I know, but that's my point that I'm making is.
Unless the board directs us to cut that position next budget cycle.
Right. The short-term example, we did have, the world language, we put it in
Yeah.
the budget specifically saying,
Right.
if it doesn't work out, we will pull it.
And,
So, in the short-term history, we have, that's one of the ways we helped this year's budget,
Yep.
right? So, that in the short-term historically, we are able to do that as a.
We have done
We
that.
have done that.
And there is another way that you could do that. Instead of, okay, we need to make sure we look at it during budget season and do that work then, that could be challenging because then you're talking about October planning for the following year. We have done temporary contracts. So you could do a one-year contract, and you post it as a one-year contract, and when you hire somebody, you make it incredibly explicitly clear that it's a one-year contract. So that, second option.
So we need a paraeducator. That's known. That's being advertised for. Can LPN or LNA or LPN, I always mix those two up. They're not a particularly unusual certification. I don't think it's impossible that you could get a candidate.
Could we
that do
support
both.
one of our
That
folks to, yeah?
that they could help support, fill in the medical needs. But I think you could advertise for a position that you want a paraeducator that holds an LNA or LPN degree. And that they have some flexibility.
To be clear, are you talking about an additional staff member or existing position? Because we do have some positions we need to fill next year
No,
that
I would say
are in
an
the budget.
existing position.
Okay.
Just make,
Okay.
and there, I don't even know if
Just
there's an
making sure I
option for
understand
that.
what you're
No, because we
saying.
need to hire that person anyway and see if you can, and maybe even have, I don't know if there's a mechanism for having a salary bonus if you have.
There's
Yeah.
a stipend built in.
Oh, stipend, okay.
Okay, Amy, go ahead.
I just want to speak to one thing about, and this actually kind of comes back to something David said, I think, at the last board meeting, which was about students with special needs and their services. And two things. One, it has been recommended to me through literature and through conversations with the Board of Nursing that that we have a dedicated individual for a particular health need. So rather than somebody who has other things going on, because then they're not really focused on that, and it's a critical.
Well, I asked you that question the last time, and you said, no, that person did not need to be with
I
this.
said I would explore it.
Oh,
And also in the hours of the day currently, and I'm not sure if Coral, I don't think Coral's on here, but, in speaking with Lindsay Kudamarsh up at Shrewsbury, that paraeducator has an absolutely full caseload. So they would be taking several hours out of their day, and those children would not be receiving their services.
Part of
So,
working with
twofold.
Coral is going to look at, some of those students are sixth graders and moving up to the high school. So the needs at one of our elementary schools might look very different next year from what they currently look like. And that's part of the trying to navigate who's going to be where and what is their day going to look like. So I hear you that person has a lot of needs at that school this year, but we do know that some of those needs aren't going to be there next year. That doesn't mean another student's not going to register over the summer, and things could change in early August. But that's why sitting down and mapping out who's going to be where and where the needs are and what the day looks like is really that option one, to fully explore all the moving pieces on paper.
okay, Dave?
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit here. If we know which kids are moving to the middle school and the high school, we know which paraeducators might not be tied to a student based on their IEP needs.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's IEP meetings that will happen and plans will be revised and developed.
Mhm.
But it seems like we may very well have a staff member who will no longer be tied to a student who could step into this role and be a dedicated person for the student if they get the training to do that. The idea of finding a paraeducator who's willing to work at a paraeducator salary, who also has the certification, seems unlikely to me to be able to find easily. I think that's not an easy lift. So I kind of feel like before we can really look at option two, we need to know from Coral or whoever, are we talking about a staff member who's currently on staff, who is willing to get this training, who could be a dedicated person to support the needs at Shrewsbury? I feel like that needs to happen before we can look at cutting this much out of other essential line items or bringing someone else on board. Like, I feel like we don't have enough information to really make this decision at this point.
Well, part of the challenge with that is if the board, we will do what the board directs us to do. We're not going to bring you an individual's name and say, here's the individual, here's their schedule, here's how that's going to work. Is the board okay with that?
Yeah.
We want the board to tell us how you want us to approach this. And that was what was discussed at finance, was bring this decision to the full board, and we will fully exhaust our resources on either option. And that's not to say we can't revisit it in a month or 2 or 3 or 4, too. I hear what you're saying, David, that you don't have enough information to make the decision, but we're not asking the board to decide if we have an appropriate person. We're asking the board, which path do you want us to fully commit to till we can tell you that it's workable or not. Sorry, Kimberly.
Okay.
Yeah, is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, and then I'm going to call the question, and and the question is to hire an additional person.
Mhm.
And we can, as I understand it, make a motion, maybe not tell anybody what to do. We can not pass that motion, and then we can ask the administration to try and fill it with the current number of staff. And then if that just doesn't work out, like Dave said, then come back and we can
So
look
those
at
are
it.
our options.
Is there such a thing as a counter motion?
No, you want to exhaust the
I think we
motion.
just
Okay,
want to exhaust this
That's part of my
motion.
Robert's Rules education.
Ned could, and the second, we could rescind the motion, but it's almost easier at this point to just see it out.
See it out,
So I just
okay.
wanted to speak a little, just because I'm like Shrewsbury rep, I don't want to speak on behalf of the team at Shrewsbury. I have a little insight. Other people in this room have more insight probably. And I know that like students come, students go, but the staff at Shrewsbury is thin and people are wearing so many hats already. So when I read option one, even if like some students are moving on to Mill River, that's gonna open up, but like I know what the staff there are doing already, and they're just doing everything they possibly can to make everything work, with already a pretty thin group. So like, reading number one, I totally do understand the impact of hiring a new person, and I was like, how is that gonna work? Are people gonna be stretched even thinner than they already are? And making sure kids' needs are met is like utmost important.
There are some changes that we are aware of, and I can't really say much more than that without getting into the realm of confidentiality.
Super cryptic, okay.
Sorry, staffing can move from building to building.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
without trouble.
but there are student needs that we are aware of that are quite likely to be fairly different next year, beyond just sixth graders moving up to seventh grade.
So before we defeat this motion, if that's what the board chooses to do, and knowing this is your last speech, you're passing this on to a new superintendent?
Yeah.
How feasible do you think it is that staff can be reassigned and moved?
Oh.
with-
In this specific scenario, I think there's a path to be able to do it. I think it's a possibility, but I think you really won't know until early August. You know, it'll take sorting through, because we have folks returning, we have folks not returning, you know, and over the summer, there may be one or two folks who still decide they're not returning. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Support staff that, you know, would be nice if we could pay them more. They work 10 months and then lots of times, you know, get summer work. Lots of times our folks who have figured out how to make that work are here long-term, and they have a summer job that they always return to. Some of our younger folks get summer work and don't come back, because that temporary summer work and then the 10-month work, it's hard to piece that together to get it to work. So I think a variable is still staffing. So, you know, while we're wrapping up the end of the year, it's hard to give you a definitive answer. There's a way that we can explore it and make it work, but then staffing can change 2 weeks from now, student needs could change a month from now. You know, this is something that, you know, if Coral were here, she'd tell you, every couple of weeks, we're having conversations about student needs and potentially needing to move people around. So this is something that we do pretty regularly and as part of our conversation. Does that mean we get to August and we have a plan that's wonderful? Not necessarily. But we could get to August and decide to post a position if we've tried and it's not working. Or the board tonight could say, we think it's important enough, you know, post the position. You know, we will go either direction. I think the challenge with this timing in the year is that we don't have funding available to do this without earmarking the funding. You know, that's, I think, why this is a much harder conversation. If we were having this conversation in January, it would be a little different. When we talked about adding an LPN at one of our elementary schools in the late spring, the board approved doing that and we posted it because we could point to funding that we could use that didn't need a cut to balance that out. We had unanticipated surplus at that point in the year, you know.
Then did that position get filled?
No, we were not able to fill that
Right.
position, unfortunately.
So,
Posting to finish up 2 months of a 10-month job, I think is harder than posting to fill 10 months of a 10-month job. You know, so I think we'd have a better shot at hiring somebody if we hired now. You know, if we got to early August and tried to hire, we may still be able to hire at that point too.
Okay, does everybody have?
I know that's not exactly what you were looking for, Rich. I think you were looking for a more definitive, simpler answer.
Sounds like there is no definitive, simple answer.
Right.
With identifying student needs and shifting staff to best meet those needs, no, that's always a work in progress.
But as the question was coming, I was hearing from Kimberly a lot of concern
Yep.
about
Yeah.
having
Can we
the staff.
actually do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we look at the needs into a building, we move staff when there are more needs than the building can cover. You know, that's a normal thing we do. And it appears to us that the needs next year are going to be such that we'll be in a different position from where we are now. And it's a small school, and if I start giving you details of student needs, then all of a sudden
We
you
don't
know
want that.
students, and,
Yeah.
yeah, we can't do that.
Hey, Ned, did you have? one
I
more?
guess I had two comments in a way. One is a question. Are those, can you even give us a direction of whether those needs are going to be increasing or decreasing at
Oh,
Shrewsbury?
yeah, I can tell you that.
I mean,
The-
if they're increasing, then I
Yeah,
think that,
Yeah.
We are not aware of anywhere where those needs are going to increase, that we don't already have an idea of the incoming needs.
And-
Could that change in a month because we have a family move in?
Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
and my other is a comment that even if we do decide to cut $70,000 in the budget and find the budget for this position, we still might not be able to fill the position, and we might be back where we are today.
That's quite possible. It's quite possible.
So,
And what would happen at that point in time, if the board were to decide to post the position, we'd post the position, we'd do everything we can to hire it. If we were unable to hire, we'd be looking internally to cover any way we could cover internally. You know, so we'd be doing that work no matter what.
and then that would presumably free back up these
Yep.
discretionary classroom
Yep.
budgets, supply budgets, et cetera.
Yep, absolutely.
So, if it comes in January,
Mhm.
let's say we filled that position, we said we were gonna take those cuts out.
Yep.
But in January, now, we actually see that there's surpluses in certain categories.
Could we give some of that supply funding back? Sure. As we get further on in the year, it becomes less and less useful in some of those areas, but yeah.
But like, for
a
the, I mean,
possibility.
really, the only one that I'm really thinking about is the supplies, and it's like, it doesn't matter, like, you know, the supplies are still good the next year.
Yeah.
You know, that's just a big, you know, we've already taken that budget from 50 to 25, and then from 25 to 0, that's a lot of, that's gone.
Yep.
Well, you're going to end up with teachers having to buy stuff on their own, which is what happens. when you get rid of
Which
supplies.
we probably will still have anyway.
Okay, I'm going to call the question.
We just restate, are we
Yeah,
are
what
voting
exactly are
on
we-
the
We
motion?
are
Hiring an additional LPN
Adding
to
an-
offset by,
essentially
Options.
adding an
Offset by those
additional
cuts.
staff.
So we're voting on option 2, yes or no?
Yes
Yeah.
or no? Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed?
oh, hang on, sorry, I'll ask you to do that again so I can get that written
Oh,
down.
sorry.
So
Favor or opposed?
For in favor, you need names.
you
Yeah,
need
who's in
favor
favor?
first.
In favor.
1, 2, 3, 4. And opposed? 1, 2. Do you have all the names? 3, 4, 5. Okay, so
Okay,
the,
and then,
Would you read?
I don't have to, it wasn't a tie. But I would oppose for, and not because I'm opposed to the additional position. I want to see if I think that there's a possibility that,
we can
We can-
keep doing that work and
I
we
want to
can-
see the service provided, but I think we can do it. I want to know that we can't do it with the
So
current
do-
staff.
Is there a do we need to direct the motion that?
To number one.
You don't know, you don't need to move that as a board
Yeah.
because there are not any financial implications of that, and that would be our standard practice anyway.
You're already doing it.
Right.
That's what we would be doing.
I guess,
Yeah.
okay, so then my question is, I need a timeline where the board takes back like, that we say, like, if there is not a thing that has happened
You-
by
is-
August, we
is the
need to know
first-
about it.
Is the first August meeting reasonable?
Yes,
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
yes.
Or
And then we
actually,
can
what
revisit
if,
the issue.
what if you said the second July meeting And then we can see if we can figure that out yet or not.
I think the
Wait
first,
till August.
We can put it
I
on
think
the
August is
agenda.
better.
But
Okay,
to post a
okay.
job,
Okay.
that means the job won't be posted until.
Well, I mean, there's just,
How about this?
there's no perfect answer to this. There's too many moving parts. You
Yep.
know, families moving into the
Yep.
district. We don't know what the staffing is, I mean,
So how about I'll say, I'll put it down tentatively for August, and if for whatever reason, if something funny happens, because it could be that mid-July, we get a new family in,
that
and we
things
go,
change.
oh, wow,
need a
this
new
is, yeah.
person anyway.
So if there's any reason for us to, if things shift in a way that we know it's gonna become more challenging, we'll bring it to you early.
I
How's
did,
that?
I did have a question
Yeah.
about this, though. So, as I understand it, many of the services provided by paraeducators that are called for by IEPs or other
Yep.
special ed documents
Yep.
are reimbursed by Medicaid. So what percent of this $70,000 are we actually paying out of the district's pocket, and what
If-
percent is being reimbursed?
If the
Oh,
student.
Yeah,
is.
the
I mean, I'm
Medicaid
assuming that
funding,
based
yeah.
on the medical, the situation that I think was described several weeks ago,
Yeah.
or months ago,
Yeah.
would be something that probably would be billable. So I'm curious to know, of the
I
$70,000.
don't think the Medicaid funding is gonna put enough of a dent in it that it would, like, if we look at Medicaid funding from all of our para educators and claiming, even our counselors, we do some claiming on, our health office staff, we do claiming on, I mean, we might, among everybody across the entire district, we might end up with $50,000.
Okay.
So one person, looking at that one person
Wouldn't
would
be-
be so small that it, yeah,
All right.
yeah, yeah. No, good question though.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know
Really good
what the difference
question.
is, the sticker price and the actual price,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. No, and that's the sort of thing that Stan is so comfortable with the Medicaid funding that Stan would have said to me, oh, we'll just use Medicaid funding. We, if folks remember, we had an LPN at Clarendon. This year, we've had a school nurse at Clarendon, but the previous year, we had an LPN. And that LPN left in the spring. We came to the board to hire a nurse to wrap up the year. We had enough Medicaid funding pooled that we could cover the differential between the LPN and the nurse. But that was for a couple of months and for, so at this point, our Medicaid funds are in a place that they can't really support anything of this
Makes
size.
sense, I just had to ask.
Yep, no, totally.
Okay. We will, I'm sure we will take care of that child. Okay. Board
I have a
education.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's kind of, you're talking about Medicaid now, which is a federal funding. Is there any impacts to our budget by cuts in the federal government, talked about federal government?
So far, no. And when we look at our title funds, our largest pot of grant funds, our title funds, our IDEA B funds, nothing is projected to change next year. That's already been in the works long enough that those likely won't change. It's the year after that we need to be nervous about for those grant funds. All totaled across the district, that might be $600,000. So that's a big amount of money, but say they cut that in half, then we'd be going, wow, how do we make up $300,000? So in the scheme of our budget, it's not gigantic. It would be problematic, but it wouldn't hamstring us. It would be something to work through and figure out, but it wouldn't be devastating. We could find a way around it, I think. Medicaid is going to be an interesting one, though. I think that would likely impact a lot of our families, and it would start to impact us in ways that are not necessarily financial. It might impact us a little bit financially, but that's such a small pot of money. Yeah, interesting to think about the future.
And scary.
Yep.
that's one word for it, Brian.
Yep.
Okay, we're up to board education.
So two things. Gosh, you really wanted to hear a lot from me tonight. Making me.
Well, I mean,
Making your
Brian, we gotta get what
Yeah,
we can get.
Yeah. So I gave you a cover letter, and then I attached something else, board member interactions with employees and public. That was something that the Community Engagement Committee asked me to put together last year. And as I was thinking through things, that popped into my head as something that doesn't really live anywhere. And we have a lot of new board members, so I thought that was a really relevant thing to share. So I would peruse that when you have time. That's just a good, hey, as a board member, you're gonna get approached. What's the most appropriate way to respond when you get approached? And I would say that a positive is, I have seen a lot of board members navigate this incredibly well. So that's a positive of the work that the board has been doing. But I wanted to make that available for everybody who had not seen that. My cover letter, let me pull that one up. Cover letter, yeah. I gave you a couple of recommendations for places that I think the board is doing good work, but places where I think the board should retain their focus and keep doing that work, because I think it's pretty foundational, pretty important work. Continue exploring how the board can set the direction toward a clear vision so everyone's goals can point that direction. I think that's number one. The board sitting down at their retreat this year and thinking about their goals and thinking about, gosh, how are we even picking our goals? Having that clear vision is hugely important. Then sitting down and revisiting your goals, reviewing progress, doing that publicly, because then you're modeling for everybody here how that work should be done. Set a vision, model your own goal setting, and reviewing your progress. That's something that I think the board has been doing a good job on the last couple of years. We've made a lot of progress there in shifting those board goals, so continue doing that work. Continue allowing those across the district to use that direction to also set their goals. I think we had a little bit of that conversation a couple of meetings ago, and David, you were asking, how does the board make sure that people are still setting appropriate goals if the board is not setting their goals? And I think that's through that direction and that clear vision. If the board has a vision for students at school engaged, well, that's an attendance thing. And then we can, if that is the direction and that is the vision, then everybody's goals should be aligning in that direction. That way, you've got administrators who are setting goals around attendance. You've got teachers who are setting goals around attendance. Maybe you have students who are setting their own goals about, I want to be present this many days a week. If you set that clear direction and that clear vision, then allow folks to set their goals to get to that vision. I think you're navigating that really hard thing to navigate. Keep trusting the guidance of the folks that you've hired to do the work. We have a lot of incredible people here who have been here. Some folks have been here for a long time. Some incredible new people too. They have expertise and they have perspective and they have information. Keep trusting those folks. But, however, keep asking questions. I think this board does an incredible job, as evidenced tonight, about asking questions. Not just, oh, we have a new master agreement, let's ratify it. We trust the negotiation team. We trust the union negotiation team. They've come to agreement on something, fantastic. Oh, but let's talk about how that happened, and let's identify who are the non-union, who are the union, who's covered, who's not. I think all of those questions are great because it shows that the board is engaged and learning, and there could be problems that nobody else has yet noticed, and if the board is lending their eyes and ears to what's going on, they could share a perspective that helps us identify a problem that we didn't even know was there. So being that engaged board and asking those questions, I think, is hugely important too. That's a really tricky balance. I'm going to trust the people I've hired, but I'm going to ask them tough questions. And that's, I think, a really nuanced thing to try and pull off. But I've seen this board do that work. I've seen this board ask questions in a way that's not looking for problems, but seeking understanding. And if the board keeps asking questions to seek understanding, not just looking for a problem, then you'll be doing incredible work for the district. Questions about any of those items? Did that do what you were looking for with what's going well, what needs to keep working?
I
Rich?
think by and large, yeah. Can I ask, just thinking about our next meeting, where we'll have a new superintendent in
Yep.
this role.
Yep.
You were a new superintendent at one
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
How do you recommend how do we establish the sort of relationship that, let me phrase it the way I wanted to phrase it.
Mhm.
What did the board do to help you make the transition best? And what did the board maybe do that was not conducive to a good
Yeah.
start?
So I think early on, I had a pretty candid conversation, I think in my interview, where I said to the board, I need you to be willing to revisit the board goals. Because if I'm going to work and we're going to try and do things to positively impact the district, we need to be on the same page about that. And I think that was a very concrete piece where I felt a disconnect between the board's work and the rest of the district's work. And the board's willingness to say, yeah, we're willing to revisit that. We're willing to rethink those. So I think if I were to generalize that, if you're meeting with your new superintendent and that new superintendent says, this is something I need, and without it, I can't work. I can't, what's the best way to say that?
I can't do my job.
Well, I can't do my job, but I think it's one more layer than that. I can't do my job the way I know I need to do my job.
Right.
Fair?
Yeah.
My values, values, I think is probably good enough. So identify what those key things are that you need to be on the same page about, whether it's how the goals are working, whatever that is, find that thing. The thing that I would have appreciated more of, and don't get me wrong, because there was some of this, absolutely, more explicitly checking in with the superintendent to say, what do you need? And I love this question. What does support look like for you? And that kind of gets back to that idea. I told the board one concrete thing that would be very supportive, the revisiting goals, and the board was willing to do that. So periodically checking back in and saying, hey, how are things going? So by the way, is there support that you need that you're not getting? What does that look like? And I think that's a powerful question, because a lot of times when we meet with folks across the district and we say, do you feel supported? Yeah. Okay. What can I do that's helpful? Well, just keep doing what you're doing. I don't like that answer, because I want to know, okay, but is there something I can stop doing? Is there something I can start doing? Is there something that I need to modify a little bit? And what I've found is a lot of people are really willing to say, like, yeah, I feel supported, especially when they're talking to their boss.
Mm-hmm.
So dig and push and get concrete. What do you need more of? What do you need less of? What do you need to shift? And again, let me back up. There were board members that absolutely did that. But I don't think it was as systematic or coordinated as it maybe could have been. Does that help, Rich?
I think also just as a board, like partially, we put a lot of board responsibility onto Brian
We do.
that as just new board members, and so I think
Yeah.
that happened. And so of just like certain timings of things that didn't happen like they should happen,
Yeah,
and
fair.
things like that. That's
Fair.
partially, unfortunately, it's mostly on Carol now, but,
Guess who I've been leaning on?
yeah, but, and just, we do have to realize too, it's like, Brian came in was, the temporary one. So like, he was part of the district. So I think part of us bringing in a new superintendent is like, we have to do that, what he's saying, but also like on like, hyperdrive and also just understanding that there is, like, we bring as a collective group, we're relatively new, but we have a culture that has been created by the history of this board. But it's like with a new superintendent, there is going to be a new shift. And so being open to that potential change of how meetings maybe are happening, or like, how they're, we have to be able to voice what we see working and not working, I think is a big part of it, at least for me when I'm thinking about this.
I think listening is tremendously important. That when the new superintendent comes in, we have to be willing. I don't think we can impose upon a new superintendent, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian. We as a group, I think it's difficult for us as a group, we're not unified enough. And I'm just saying, we're not. We're all new at this. And so for us to say to the superintendent, this is what we want, I think it's important that we listen, because I'm sure Cheryl will have some ideas that she wants to talk to us about. And we have to be willing to listen to those and do what we can as a group to answer the questions that she's going to have, to respond to the questions that she's going to have, to be able to us look at ourselves and go, okay, what can we do better? Because I think that's a part of it. New board members, old board members, it doesn't matter. Really, in my mind, the culture part is a piece, and I will always be here to bring you the history, like it or don't. But, it is important. It's an important piece. But the culture shouldn't dictate what decisions the board and the superintendent make. It can influence them. It can say, oh, I hadn't thought of that, maybe this would work. But I don't want to get into the situation where, well, no, we've never done that here at Mill River.
Sorry, we're not, yeah. And I think, evaluation was something that there was a really good dialogue that I think is a concrete example of what you're talking about. Meeting together and having a dialogue about what needs to be done. And both sides being open to that conversation, I think is hugely important. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you can adopt that kind of posture as a full board, I think that's important. And I think that's an interesting thing you said, Len, because the board is not going to be telling the superintendent, these are the things you need to do. The board is going to be saying things like, our communities care about students being safe at school. And I think we had a couple of really good conversations when we started down the road of talking about strategic planning and looking at all sorts of input we could get from all sorts of different places. And we had some conversations around, do we want our students to be the best math students in the world? Or do we want our students to feel that they're valued and safe and belong here? And it's really easy to measure test scores. And it's really easy in a trap that a lot of folks fall into where they go, academics need to improve. And I think that's the sort of vision that the board can offer a superintendent. Our communities care about these things. Our communities care about students being at school taken care of. Well, that can get at attendance, again, like we were talking. But you're not telling the superintendent, you need to improve attendance this year. And I think that's a tricky relationship.
That's why we
to
had to
sort
change
through.
our goals.
Yeah.
Because when you brought it up, when we looked at our goals, and it's saying, okay, our test scores need to go up by 10% every year.
No, do it.
And who are we?
Yeah.
And
I think that dialogue matters so much because, the superintendent then might say, okay, great, here are my goals. Well, the board's got to be willing to say, I don't know if those align with our vision. let's talk through that, let's figure that out. And I think that process is hugely valuable. And if you can model that from the top to the bottom, because if the board being my boss, the board is coming to me and saying, what do you need, how can we support you? What does that concretely look like? What are your goals? Okay, let's talk, because I don't know if your goals line up. Is that how you want me to approach my administrative staff? Is that how you want the administrative staff to approach teachers? Great, then approach the superintendent that way. If you approach the superintendent and say, these are the things you have to do, and if you don't do them, we got a problem, do you want your superintendent to do that to their administrative staff? Do you want the administrative staff to do that to their teachers? And I think the board's responsibility to really be the standard bearers and the models, I think, I can't overstate that. And I think that's something, if you have a strong partnership with your superintendent, those things will work. So thanks for bringing that up, Len.
Any other questions or comments for Brian? Discussion?
I've appreciated working with all of you, I really have. Absolutely.
Yep. You're going to be
There's-
missed.
there's
Mutual.
Good work happening, and I trust that you will keep growing and doing even better work.
Hope so.
We shall see.
And I'm just going to say this in public. I've appreciated, Brian, probably known you more than anybody here.
Going back to subbing in my classroom.
We've had our differences,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
absolutely no doubt about that. But the beauty of those differences was me being able, or you calling me, and being able to get together and
Always
talk.
talk it through. Yep.
And, you know, it wasn't always smooth. But it was always, in the end, productive and kept us moving towards what we wanted to accomplish. And so I appreciate that greatly. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. My
Definitely.
pleasure.
All right.
I hate to bring up a clerical question at this moment. Did we skip the new contracts, or is that later down in the agenda?
That's later,
Later, yep.
during personnel on committee. Okay, so board retreat planning. There's a reason I'm not an event planner.
Or is
But,
is it new superintendent welcome planning? Is that,
Oh,
was that part?
did
of-
I skip it? I
Oh, I
just,
I feel like it
Number
kind of got
11.
rolled
I don't know if
into
we
a little bit.
talked about that. I don't know.
No, we didn't.
new soup.
Number 11? No, we're at 11.
We're at
Yeah.
11. I went board retreat planning. Okay, but new superintendent welcome planning. Any ideas?
Just so folks know, my idea is that we do something like in August. Invite the public, teachers, administrators, et cetera, something in the cafeteria. And these are just my ideas. People are more than glad, should be more than glad to change them. I was gonna call, I didn't today, but I'm gonna call the lady that's in charge of the cafeteria. Is it Frederick?
You mean here at Mill River, Teresa?
Yeah, Teresa.
Yep.
I'm gonna call her and ask them if they can do anything. And Brian, you might be able to answer this question. Would we have an issue if someone from outside came in?
For staff, no. No. If you're just doing something for staff, no.
Okay.
They, I think, will probably be more than willing. And
Yes,
do
they
some
have
of the
been in the
things.
past.
Yep, yep. But
So-
no, shouldn't be an
So are you
issue.
thinking of an evening or a daytime or a, what is, a welcome? Is it, would we do it as maybe part of a board meeting or before a board meeting or
I want
a
it to be
special night?
separate, because it's not the board. It should be the community welcoming the new superintendent.
You want to make it part of community conversations, since it's a
Well,
community thing?
that's what I wonder if it should be,
Kind of like we
maybe.
did for the.
Do an hour long instead
Well,
of a
remember we
half
did
hour?
that special community conversations that was very successful with the,
With the
legislators.
Invited?
along that model, maybe make one of the community engagement meetings the
Hour-long and a
the
welcome.
hour-long welcome for the superintendent.
But could it
Yeah.
be a little more, like, I think what you were suggesting, maybe what I was hearing was more of like a mingle,
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, we
Instead
could,
of like sitting down and.
Well, but that's the beauty
absolutely.
of the community conversations format. It doesn't have to be sitting down here.
You could do it in the
we
library.
can do it in the library.
Or the cafeteria.
Or the cafeteria.
maybe.
so could we consider not the upcoming one, but the one after that, having that
August,
be?
middle of
in
August.
Although we're supposed to chew on cell phone policy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different.
It could be, it doesn't have to be community engagement.
I was just thinking that might
No,
be kind of a.
no, it doesn't.
I guess we're looking at, I have a question though. So are we looking to do, how are we as a board looking to get to know and welcome the superintendent? Or we're looking at how we want to introduce the superintendent to our communities?
I think it's the
Because they're
second.
two different things,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah,
And I
it's
think the
second.
second one is more, in my
Right, I
opinion.
mean, I'd rather
more
see the
accurate.
person come to each school and have an open house with this meet and greet with the superintendent in each school building with like some sort of like ice creams or some sort of like, get your family out there, meet the superintendent, you know,
That's
like.
true.
I think that would make more sense to introduce the superintendent to the general public in our school
In the
system
communities.
versus having us meet the superintendent as a board.
Yeah,
And
Because
then
we're gonna
that's
spend a
different
ton of time
things.
with the superintendent anyway.
Are you
Right.
doing that, like, because, we already do that there's like the open house that happens at each elementary school, and as long as they weren't all happening on the
I
same
think that would be a
day,
great way for the community to
you
meet
know,
the superintendent.
the superintendent.
But not
would
us
be
necessarily.
expected to- Right.
Right.
so it sounds like that would involve, sorry to interrupt, but asking each of the principals for their open house schedule and asking if they're willing to make that as part of the,
Like,
and
announce
asking
it.
Cheryl if she's
Right.
comfortable with that.
It's a lot of ice cream for Cheryl.
There's that part of it.
Icy thing
That's 5
instead.
ice cream social.
For like the us, like for the us like for our group, it's the next thing on our topic, but like the board retreat, Brian will be done. And
Yes.
so, it'll
She'll be
be,
there.
there'll be that time where, that can be part of the board retreat, it's like we were talking about having, food or whatever. It's like for that's where I would say like that's an effective mechanism for us to do that in a more
Right.
personal way.
Right.
I have a clarifying question. Does the board retreat usually include the superintendent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I said that quickly, but I've only been to one.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
the superintendent was
As long as I've been
there.
on board, it always has.
So we have an opportunity at the board retreat, which is upcoming, so that's convenient.
Yeah.
So I think having the open houses, include that explicitly is a great idea.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because you're not going to get a lot of kindergarten parents to come to Mill River for a big meet
Because they gotta
and
put their
greet.
kids
So,
to bed.
we don't need to make a motion for that, though, do we? We can just.
But what we would have to ask is to make sure, like, to just see what the availability of those, like, if they all happen on the same day, then, she
Right.
can't go to all of them and
Right.
and be part of it. So that would be an ask, would be, to just find out if it's feasible,
Right.
if it's,
Okay, I'll reach out to the
Thank you, Carol.
principals.
Okay.
If I no, I'll write it down.
Carol?
Oh, yeah, go
May I
ahead.
say something?
Sure.
I just, only because, the open, just food for thought, the open house in different schools looks different. Basically, looks different in each school is how I should say. And some of the communities even have a separate ice cream social, some kind of combine them.
Yeah.
But often, open houses are, parents are chasing their kids through classrooms, right?
Right.
So just to keep an open mind
So-
about what you actually want,
Okay,
be
so-
hoping to accomplish.
No, that's a good point, Joe. So what I will do is I'll reach out to the principals and say, the board is trying to figure out how to introduce the superintendent to each of your communities. Some ideas we have are
Yeah, what do you
ice
think?
cream social, open
Yeah,
house. What would work for you? We could try and do it in August, but might as well let school start up and let, you know. And then the other thing is we do meet in the elementary schools. So if nothing happens, we can maybe piggyback on one of those meetings for a meet and greet.
I think the key is, I wish that us being like, we're gonna have a thing in the cafeteria would bring people in, but I think it is like trying to jump on a bandwagon of somebody else's thing that's they're already being drawn to is the best way.
Yeah.
I look forward to it, parents expect it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I will reach out. Okay. Okay, so then that swings us, sorry I missed that, and I had jumped to board retreat planning, and that's where I was lamenting my event planning skills. So Rich was kind enough to put together a doodle, and we didn't hear from everybody, but we actually could not come up with a date where I had put out I'd put out the regular board meeting dates, and I had put out 2 Saturdays. So it looks like Saturday mornings work better, apparently, for people than to come in a couple of hours earlier on a regular board meeting night. So that, but one of the things we talked about was having Brian facilitate. He is not available either the 12th or the 19th. I did text.
Which is okay. You can,
No,
you
listen.
can-
No,
Nice
listen.
try,
Brian.
Nice
And
try.
then I tried to text Cheryl, and I'm guessing she might be involved with graduation stuff. And so, how late does do we have to do the retreat, like, midsummer? Can we
There's
do
no-
it later?
We
can do it
We did summer
whenever.
retreats in the winter or something, like, we
Yeah.
just did a Saturday, I remember it was
Yeah.
snowing one time,
Yeah.
so.
So now I'm wondering if we shouldn't wait till Cheryl comes on board, gets her legs under her, and then,
I think there's value in doing it before the school year, because then you get some really good FaceTime with the new superintendent before things get super busy,
okay.
and then you can revise your goals for the year. So my personal opinion would be early
Like-
August at the latest for this first one.
Okay.
And then after that, I think you can be a lot more flexible.
All right, so how about, Rich, we'll send out another doodle with some August dates and see if we can get, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Brian, what's your availability in early August?
Yeah, that's what I.
Great
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I actually think I'm around in August. I won't be starting school until you're all starting school. So from about the first weekend of
look at a
August, I know I'm
calendar.
busy, but after the first weekend in August,
Since
you know.
we're all here
around.
except for
Okay.
Stephen.
I'd actually like to echo what Brian said,
Well,
too.
he's
So I think
going-
it would be useful to have the retreat before school starts.
Well, but I mean, we could do it in that, after that first weekend of August, we could find a day in there.
I can't find my calendars, I know they're on here. Jeez, crow.
Wait, or I guess,
All
I
right,
mean, Brian, it'd
so,
be wonderful to have you there, but you're officially done.
yeah, no, we're paying him.
I don't mind.
Oh, I missed that.
Yes, he will be paid.
I was like, that's
I-
a
He'll be at work.
big ask.
I do want to be incredibly clear, you don't need me. I'm happy to help.
But as a
Happy to
moderator,
help. I'm happy to help.
Personally feel that we do need a facilitator.
So
I
would both Brian and Cheryl be there? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, but Cheryl will be serving as the superintendent.
Okay.
Brian will be a facilitator.
I
So
think that's fabulous.
Yeah, so he'll be making sure we stay on task, that we'll work to get an, a agenda of sorts.
Yes.
And, we already have a couple of topics that we have.
Well, I, for one, would just like to say that having you there, Brian, would be, I know it will be helpful, because
Yeah.
I'm sure Cheryl's going to be great, but I'm also, I know we're all going to miss your,
Well, and there's just history there, so that would be useful.
yeah.
Would be happy to help.
A data dump, you'll be able to.
If I'm not there, I know you'll be super successful too. But I am happy to help.
So the Saturdays in August I'm just going to throw it out here since everybody's here, and if we can come close to a date, that'd be good.
On the Brian
Oh,
there, it sounds great. And all of a sudden, this just hit me. And I had asked you, the things that, would you have been comfortable in a retreat, meeting the board for the first time with your predecessor there?
I think there's some value to having that time without me. I do. I'm happy to help. But I think that's
Make up your
a
mind.
reasonable point, Rich. I think that would be a great question for Cheryl,
I do too.
honestly. And, she's going to come next week and do some work with the leadership team. And,
maybe I could. meet
there's
with
going to
her.
be some overlap, but I think that's a transition plan and expected, and,
What's the timing of that transition?
yeah. What's that?
What is the timing of the transition?
So I met with Cheryl right before spring break, actually. So we did a little bit of sitting down and orienting and figuring things out. Jody met with her then as well, and they mapped out some plans. And we've slowly been sending things her way as they're relevant, as their next year things. And she'll be here Wednesday to do a little more of that transition work.
Maybe more succinct.
Yeah.
When is her first day?
July 1. Sorry, I didn't realize that's what.
No. That was
July
also
1
helpful
technically.
information.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, I would just follow up on Rich's comment that I think if you were going to be kind of hanging around and there was some
Yeah.
feeling from Cheryl that was going to be like an ongoing thing, that'd be one issue.
Yep.
But I think you said earlier that Cheryl will be there as the superintendent, you would be there as a facilitator. And that's kind of the end, that's it, it's done after that. So I would think that's valuable.
Yeah.
The institutional knowledge and just what, you've experienced in the past as part of the transition process. So on balance, my view is it would be a
I'm not,
good thing.
I'm not going to come hang out on random Tuesdays.
I didn't think you were.
And I mean, if Brian did not want to do that, did not want to be the facilitator,
He
or
said he's
if
happy
the
to do it,
board,
though.
I know. And if the board,
I'm glad you caught that, Ned.
or
Yeah,
if
we
the
got you on
board-
record.
We can't, VSBA has a person who could come as a facilitator. But I think we talked about it a little, and I'm not sure who I talked about it with. But the idea that, Brian, you put it perfectly, Greg, he has the institutional knowledge. And so, I'm glad that we're gonna, look at August. I'm looking at either the 2nd, the 9th, or the 16th. So, Rich, if you could do a doodle for those dates.
Well, I think Brian said he's not going to be
Second
here the
is-
first weekend
yeah,
of
Second
August.
is the one that I'm not.
So the
around.
9th
Okay,
or the
the
16th.
9th or the 16th.
All right.
So we'll send that out, and
And we can weigh in.
that'll be a morning, Saturday morning. I think we can get the Grange if people are still up for that, and then we can do like a breakfast brunch kind of.
Are we anticipating being done by noon, do you think?
Well, I put 9 to 12. 3 hours, I think that's
Enough.
enough, and, we're adults, we could keep going if we wanted, I suppose, but, or we
Not
could
right.
I don't think
reschedule.
that's his desire.
No, it's not that. I have other obligations.
That's
Sorry.
Okay.
We'll be done at 12.
Perfect. I'll go with either day.
Okay. All right, then. But I will get in touch with Cheryl and try and see what her vision for a retreat would look like. I think we have a lot of people who weren't at the last retreat, right?
Yeah.
I was there, and, yeah, Ned,
The
you guys
majority.
weren't.
I was in the hospital.
No.
All right, so
And
the
you-
9th at 9 AM to noon.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Oh, we did
9th
it?
or the
9th or
16th.
16th.
No, but
we're
like,
still
but like
saying.
those 2 dates, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either 9th or
I'd
16th.
like to move forward.
Ready?
Yeah.
Time to move on.
Well,
Okay. Committee reports. Personnel.
Yes, that would be me. I sent things out to the Personnel Committee. I hope you received them. It's that time of the year where we need to get things buttoned up by July 1, because that's when people tend to come on board. So, Brian's been giving me the contracts, and we didn't have a meeting scheduled, so here we are. So I'd like to make a motion to offer a contract to Melody Falker, K-6 classroom teacher, 1.0 full-time equivalency. Discussion.
School?
Wallingford. Melody is Wallingford.
What,
Who seconded that? Was that you, Rich? Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
what will she be teaching, do we know?
Wallingford, it's either first grade or third grade, I believe. And there are two. You've got Melody, and then you've got Cassidy. So, one or the other. Both of them,
Yeah.
Melody and Cassidy, are new hires at Wallingford.
Any other discussion? Questions? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Since we're on the subject, I'd like to make a motion that we offer Cassidy Collette a contract as a K-6 classroom teacher, 1.0 full-time equivalency.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion.
What's this position?
Wallingford, and it's the one that's,
The other one.
yeah,
The other-
exactly.
other one.
That one,
Or this one or that one.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Thank you.
There's retirements.
Cassidy's third grade.
There you go.
Just took me a little while to get there.
I know you sent them to me.
Were those retirement replacements, or?
We had an individual that moved to be the math interventionist, so we had one opening due to that. We had one teacher who relocated because their fiance has work elsewhere. So,
That was, I guess I didn't send that to the full board, but the folks on the personnel, because I sent them the
the
notice
list
that
I
you
gave
sent
you.
me.
Okay, great.
But I didn't send it to all the board. Next, I'd like to make a motion to offer Mina Kanguli Kiefner, offer her a contract as educational support staff, 1.0 full-time equivalency.
Second.
Thank you.
That is Mill River Library Assistant.
Yeah. Discussion? All those in favor?
Awesome.
Thank you. And lastly, I'd make a motion to offer a contract to Bridget Hughes, K-6 classroom teacher, 1.0 full-time equivalency.
Second?
Discussion.
That's Tinmouth,
You do that, right?
third and fourth grade, I believe.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. The next personnel meeting would be the first meeting in July. Are we having one or two?
If we do a July 2nd one, that would be the one.
Okay. So let's tentatively send that for July 2nd at 6. The only other personnel thing, and I don't know if it's on here, Kim Maneri, who is the athletic director, I know she sent folks a letter of resignation.
Oh, and we didn't actually accept that, did we?
No, we did not.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that.
So she sent that to the board, so everybody should have seen it. And actually, interview process, well, let me stop. I make a motion to accept the resignation of Kim Maneri as athletic director
Seconded.
with regrets.
Discussion
With regrets.
with regards.
Kim's a former student here.
Be my new colleague.
Yeah, she's going to Castleton.
Yeah.
She had a great social studies teacher in 8th grade. But anyway, okay, and I know,
I
all
would
those in
just like
favor?
to say, discussion, that Kim was instrumental in starting, maintaining, supporting the Unified Sports Program, and also allowing students with disabilities who were otherwise eligible to play sports to be able to participate in sports by working with coaches on accommodations, and really did a lot of work in the area of inclusion
Yeah.
for our students. And she went beyond, really beyond the pale.
And that
for-
unified sports has grown.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah.
Not just
Awesome.
here, but within
Awesome
the state.
program.
Yeah, so I just want to get that
Yeah.
on the record.
That's great.
All right.
All those in favor? And then the only other thing I'd say is, I know interviews have been conducted. Sean's been running the interview process, and I'm sure we'll be hearing soon who's Kim's successor might be.
And I would recommend invite Sean to the Personnel Committee 7-2 so he can share with the committee the process
That'd
and
be
lay
great.
all
Yeah,
that
and
out.
he did with me. I sent
Yeah.
Brian and Sean
Yeah.
an email, and Sean was very great.
What is the process when we hire someone
Depends on who we're hiring.
at this level?
So athletic director is somebody who works under Sean. So Sean put together, I'll give you the quick version and then he can tell
Works
you
under,
more.
under the principal,
Yep, yep.
or he or she?
Yep, yep. Historically, that's been how the position's been set up, yeah. So, committee of folks, including parents, folks associated with athletics and staff.
Trainer.
Yep, athletic
Were
trainer.
there any parents involved in this hiring?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. He collected all those folks together, and they did a first round of interviews, and that committee decided who was going to go to the second round of interviews.
15 applicants?
Yeah, we had a good number of applicants, yep. And they ended up with, I think, 3 folks who were finalists that were interviewed in a second round, and I think he did a valuable way of trying to solicit a little more than a typical interview would give you, the community feedback. He used to give the finalists to say, hey, here's our community's feedback for how things are going with athletics. How would you approach this? So come
The
prepared
two-question
to.
feedback survey that was emailed to parents?
Yeah, all of the information that was collected. sorted through
I thought
that.
it was a great survey, personally.
I thought it was a terrible survey, frankly, but.
Fair enough, David. So the information that was collected from the community, it was sort of teased out some of the trends of what folks were talking about, and the candidates came prepared to share how they would approach work based on that community feedback, which I think is interesting because then it's, a little beyond just the resume or answer the questions and everybody answers the questions, but really, what would you do? And I think that was the most interesting part of the interview process where they really started to distinguish among the 3 finalist candidates. So he can
David,
definitely
just-
share more about that.
Just to get back to what you were saying, I think it's something that we need to look at. The athletic director
Under a principal?
traditionally
That's bizarre.
is like out nowhere. And yet, they are held as the administrator in charge of a building when there's an activity there. And they may be the only
Yeah.
individual in charge. And so so if they're an administrator or not,
Yep.
I think we need to, and this is down the road.
That used to be a teacher contract.
Yeah.
Years ago, when
Yeah.
Kim first came on, it was a teacher contract,
Yeah.
which is even more interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we, in the Personnel Committee, can look at, is to start with, is what is that position? And it's not just here at Mill River, it's
A little different everywhere.
it's everywhere. And it's just this sort of,
Yeah, well, I'm just curious, so where do you think that, what are you thinking about?
I mean, about which, the survey or about?
No, I thought the survey was fine, so we'll pass, it's done. But just who should be the supervisor? You think
I
the
think it should be the.
superintendent?
I think superintendent should be the supervisor, yeah. I think it's a district level position. I mean, you're looking to offer athletics to seventh graders, eighth graders, as well as maybe K-6 or 3-6.
There's some 5 or 6.
So you're looking across multiple buildings,
Yep.
and I think you need to have a vision that serves not under the principal, but is a vision for the district. What sort of athletics do you want to offer to the district? What sort of goals do you have for the district's athletics and teams?
Yep.
So I think the idea of having that under one person who's tied to one particular building in 4 particular grades is stifling at best. I think that it needs to be something that's, reports to the superintendent and reports to the board.
yeah.
Um,
That's where the classification.
Right.
And the other part is, there was and again, talk about the good work that Kim did in terms of an elementary school athletic director
Right.
that was newly hired a couple years ago, maybe, Brian?
Yep, Mackenzie.
To oversee activities at the elementary schools. And so, that puts her in a puts that person in a supervisory position as well.
Right. Okay, so let's talk to, I don't know, we'll talk to Cheryl about
Sean,
that.
well, and Sean can
Sean's-
come and share at the next personnel committee.
Yeah.
Okay,
about-
yeah, okay, so we'll keep that on the burner.
Yeah, I
The
think
middle,
it's a
the
valuable
middle burner.
conversation. And that's all I have.
Policy.
I'll be quiet.
Policy is exciting tonight.
Oh, sorry.
What? Okay.
6 o'clock or 6:30? Probably
6.
6 o'clock, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, policy is exciting tonight. Okay, we have some first, second reads, and we've got the cell phone policy for second read. So let's do that first. So we met
Do
yesterday.
you want to make a motion to adopt it, and then we can discuss?
Yeah, we met yesterday. We had a little bit of input still on it, but we're moving forward. So make a motion to adopt F16. Sorry, now I just lost it myself. Okay. Phone and personal electronic device free school.
I'll second.
Okay, so tell us anything? We had discussion, but go
Chewed
ahead.
on it pretty intensely.
Yeah, I think probably most people are pretty up to speed. We just forwarded, Gray did an awesome historical record of our process, and so we just forwarded it to the whole board right before the meeting. So if you have not kind of been a part of it for the last almost year, you can kind of look at that to see all the input we've gotten. One of the things that came up with this from both Jody and Brian, great suggestion, is in August to do a more in-depth talk with parents. This is happening, and have that be a time that the board is there and admin is there. What else? Anyone else have anything to say?
There was the conversation we had at prior meeting about the photography, of course. And I just wanted to say, just before leaving the meeting, Gray had used the analogy, the camel's nose under
Camel's nose under
the tent, right? Is that once we start to carve out any exceptions, it gets really dicey. And I thought that was a really good way to keep us focused there, so.
Yeah, it's true.
I haven't read Gray's thing, but we had a ad hoc committee that had some positives, had some negatives, but one of the messages coming out of that committee was electronic devices are a problem in the school. So that was some board work that then helped push, along even further. So I appreciate all the people that are on policy now that did that work.
Absolutely.
Want to call the question?
Okay. All in favor? Is that what I say?
You got it?
Can I vote twice?
Ah,
Unanimous.
Not in our
Good.
system.
Nice.
So does that mean it's done?
It is.
It's
Yep,
a
it's
policy.
adopted.
Put your hand down.
Now the hard work begins with that one.
Okay.
Okay, we also have, for second read, we are naming it, so the selection, wait, no, sorry, y'all, bear with me.
Library.
Behavioral threat or library? G2 is library.
G2, selection of library materials. So, the rest of the policy committee can help me on this one. We already did, this is the second read. Make a motion to adopt G2, selection of library materials.
Second.
Discussion?
I'd just like to offer the comment that the best part of this is where it talks about what cannot be used as a reason for deselection. It's kind of backwards language, but basically it's a really specific list of reasons that you can't remove books from the library. And I think it's very powerful.
It was well put together.
Well, and I think we need to give a lot of credit to the school librarian here.
Karen McCullough.
Yeah, Karen, who has done a tremendous job and actually was kind of cutting edge with this policy. So she deserves a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, that's great.
And just, it's one of those iterations too of where it's like the policy is supporting the professionals that we have in the building, right?
Which
That's
is
the
our
important part.
overreaching policy.
Yep.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Okay, and our last one is F33, behavioral threat assessment. Make a motion to adopt F33, behavioral threat assessment as a policy.
Second.
Discussion.
So who wrote this policy?
This is VSBA, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I actually think Jody could chime in if I'm wrong, but I think AOE actually
Yeah, I thought it
drafted
was AOE.
this.
That's what we were told.
Yeah.
So it's a state
It's a
level thing.
long one.
Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but A, it's required, but B, you told us that we are basically already doing the things that are specified.
Great, yes, that's great on both accounts. So this policy is much longer than our typical policies, and you can see the stylistic differences between the VSBA policies we usually adopt and this AOE policy. But it is a part of the new AOE request and requirements. And, you know, it's also going through, you know, pieces of legislature. We've been doing this work for many years, and we are well ahead of the curve, and have a 40-page procedural document that backs up the policy. So, you know, I do think it makes sense to just adopt as written, but please know that we take all of the procedures really seriously. We try to be as tight as we can on them.
Thanks for all your work on this, Ruby.
Yep.
Okay, any more discussion? All in favor?
Great.
I'd just like to say one thing about the cell phone ban that I forgot that you were here, Jody, but in my little written comment, I gave you a big shout out for all of the work that you did with the surveys and going to the administrators and all of that was really super helpful, and we couldn't really do it, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jody. Our next policy meeting is July 8th on Tuesday, July 8th at 5:30. That's it for policy.
Here at Middlebury.
Yes, it's hybrid also.
Okay, building and grounds.
I was stuck in Boston at a doctor's appointment, so I wasn't at this meeting. So someone that was there.
I think I have minutes, but, yeah.
I was there.
Let me look and see if I can find, sorry.
And
Were you there, Ned?
you're
Do
up.
you remember?
Tell us all about it.
We talked a lot about how much of the budget, the building fund we have spent, and how much is remaining. And I believe we reached a consensus that we should kind of hold on to the remaining about $300,000 for any emergency projects, like, knock on wood, a boiler breaking or something in the winter. Some of those emergency projects can be very expensive, so that was the consensus we reached, and it was more like 350,000, I think, because there's a little more than what was voted in on this past
I can't get it
meeting
to
day.
open.
And that includes the money that we've already, like, for doing
Yes,
floors
yes.
and like the stuff. So
So-
there, it's not like there's a stopping of things that are.
Right.
You're gonna still see stuff occurring throughout
that remaining
even the
fund
next 2 years.
is including what is already allocated and approved by the board.
Yeah, there's,
So
I,
that was the piece we were kind of missing for several meetings, was how much have we actually committed to spending? We don't know how much we actually have left, so we should put a pause on approving any large projects.
And huge pat on the back for B&G committee for getting those projects in line.
And Tim
That's
for
fantastic.
going out and getting the bids and,
We've got a lot of good things.
yeah, there's quite a
that we've
few
worked on and
projects.
a lot coming this summer, which is great. It's going to be a busy summer.
So
Tim-
are we
Tim also-
missing anything? Or is there something that didn't get done? You said there was.
There's a 5-year plan with another, like
$10
$3 million
million
that we'd love to spend.
$5 to $10 million is the estimate if we did
We'll keep
everything
chipping
on
away
the
at it,
five-year
But we,
plans.
yeah.
But for this year, you must have a plan.
I
If
think
you
the-
have a
Yes.
5-year plan or a 10-year plan or something, but you must have one for this year because you asked for so much for a budget, right?
Yes.
Is there anything we didn't do this year? I don't think there was anything pressing on the priority list that we didn't do this year. I
Tim
think
was
we
actually
got-
requesting we don't take on any more large projects.
Yeah,
Could I-
yeah, because they've got plenty.
Now, who's Tim?
The building and grounds manager that is employed by the school. I don't know his title, sorry.
Yeah, Director of Buildings and Grounds.
Rich?
I wanted to know who Tim was.
And just be, and.
Who is this Tim you say?
Who's this Tim guy?
Monty Python.
That the buildings and grounds is non-budgeted projects. So it's not, it's
It's a
it
separate
lives
fund.
outside of when they craft the budget for the year. Those if there are specific projects that fall in the line for building and maintenance stuff, that is there. Buildings and grounds is just using the surplus money funds that have been allocated in the past. Because that's normally, and when we ask in previous years, we used to ask for anticipated surpluses. In the past few voting times, we've said, can we take it out of the current surplus? And most likely, given what we still have, we'll probably continue to ask for that for the next few years as part of the plan.
Also, a comment from Tim that was educational for me, revelatory almost, was that Vermont is the only state that does not have a statewide school buildings fund.
Right.
It's a little bit of a problem.
After 2008, that financial
Yeah.
crisis, basically all of New England got rid of theirs, and everyone else has reinstated it. And in the new foundation formula, somehow they've also forgotten that.
So that's not part of the new formula.
That's how that
PFAS and
addition got built.
didn't adequately fund that
Right,
either.
and it's how towns build their roads and stuff, like we all wait for our grant pool to come around, and then you spend a bunch of money, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's how it should work, but it's not how it works right now.
Don't either remember or don't know when the next meeting is.
Next meeting, tentative pending receipt of bids on TES floor and updates, June 30th at 5 o'clock. But we'll make a decision on June 23rd. So Tim will let us know if he got the bids.
So when is the next meeting and the time and where?
Well, it's tentatively June 30th at 5 o'clock here, but it's only because we're waiting for some bids for some floors and the updates on the MRU water system. But if Tim doesn't get the bids, I don't know what we'll probably wait a month. and-
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing pending. Normally it's the last Monday of the month at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, yeah.
That water project, system project could end up being enormous, though.
Is that the mezzanine one?
I think
It's-
the water testing for the school came back with
Yeah.
several violations. Yeah, I think it was lead
was-
and I don't remember
Is
what
that the
else.
thing that there is state funding for, or no?
No, this is like deferred, there was a lot of deferred maintenance that didn't get done, and so there's a lot of problems, but we don't have all the results yet, I guess, is what Tim was
So why
saying.
doesn't that cut into your 300,000?
Well, that's
Well,
what the
it might.
300,000
It
is
might.
for.
That might be that emergency spending that we have to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Let's
Hmm?
let's not do it.
So
That
why
is
do
very
you,
not good.
why do you
Leave this
say
alone.
it might?
You don't have all the
It
results.
will.
much
You
fun.
don't-
We're
Oh,
gonna,
yeah.
we're
Oh, yeah.
torturing
More
Brian
accurate
tonight,
answer.
we're making
No,
him
no,
work
no, no,
overtime.
you're fine.
We don't have all the answers
We don't
yet.
have a
Absolutely
budget
fine.
line item allocated for it, so it will. And it could be enormous.
Yeah,
More than 300?
We
We
don't
don't
have
know.
no way of guessing. But there's lead in our pipes, so
Find out.
we've got to do
There's
something.
lead in these pipes in this building?
I don't know if,
Well, lead came back in the water test results.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Must be
I
solder.
I don't think, if I had to guess, and I could be totally wrong, I don't think it'll be to the tune of 300,000. I think we have we have taps that we don't have to use. And if we try some of the mitigation that's inexpensive mitigation, it could just be we put a tap out of service. So you're talking about, there's a tap in the corner of the building that nobody's used for 3 months, and they might use it 3 months from now. So you spend a couple $1,000s trying to mitigate, and if it doesn't work, you put a sign on it, you take it off the wall, and you use the one next door that's viable
okay.
and tests okay.
Because it has happened,
Yeah.
you know, other
Yeah,
schools
yeah,
have
yeah.
tested for, and then we have had.
Because then you look at it and you go, well, the next step is 15,000 for this, 15,000 for that, 15,000 for that, and you probably don't end up doing that work. Because we have enough taps that test appropriately, and we have,
Okay.
and water fountains that are used for drinking that test appropriately, so.
You've already got more information than I did.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well,
Yeah.
it seemed like folks were starting to go, uh-oh. And I think we're
I think that
not
was the
quite
sense I
there
left
yet.
the Buildings and Grounds meeting with,
Yeah.
was, uh-oh. So
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it sounded like it was more than just the water coming out. It sounded like
We-
whatever the underground system is, there's a lot of failures going on,
We
and they don't know
have-
what they are.
We have a couple of things that are, so separate out from the lead testing, we have a couple of water projects that could be pricey.
Yeah.
The lead testing won't be
Right.
the one, I don't think that's.
So what are those other projects, or can you talk about?
So there's one that's the mezzanine here.
There's one,
and,
what?
Up in the mezzanine, so if you walk through the cafeteria, there's a door that leads to a space upstairs that's got a lot of equipment up there. There is some piping up there that is really old, and
Is what?
really old, needs to be updated, replaced, and that might be a $20,000, $30,000 project up there. So we do have a couple of places where, you know, where.
But that's not, that has been, we've actually been talking about that for like
Yeah.
multiple years at this point. Because there's
That's
also,
on the radar.
because it's old, there's abatement that also has to go along with it.
So what Tim was probably talking about at the B&G meeting was that the state has shifted requirements for public water systems.
That's what it is.
So the work to make sure we're in compliance as a public water system, that might be a pricey project in one of our buildings. I can't give you a ballpark on that
Yeah.
at all.
Is
And
that
that's
like
what
a
we
well,
were,
or what?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's what Tim was gonna come back to us with on
Yeah.
June 30th, if he gets the information.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, community engagement.
Our last meeting was before this meeting. We had a few members of the public here. Continuing interest in cell phone policy, general support, just good questions about details. I also, so that was good. Also met this morning with members of the 50th anniversary planning team, stakeholders, and we got started by picking a date, a tentative date. My next meeting about the 50th anniversary is on July 10th. Anybody who has ideas should feel free to reach out to me. Our next meeting will be July 16th at 6:30 before the board meeting. And before that, we'll have community conversations, as we've been doing. That seems to go pretty well. So from 6 to 6:30, community conversations, and 6:30 to 7 will be the community engagement meeting, and we'll focus back on the 50th anniversary and maybe discussion of the ed bill, if it happens or doesn't.
Can I just ask, you said July 10th was the next meeting of that group?
Yeah, we'd love you to be there, actually.
You walked into that list.
But you don't have to,
No,
I'll fill you in too.
I did so purposely. What time and where?
July 10 at the July 10 at 9 a.m. at the high school.
Okay, thank you.
And that, I actually have notes from today's meeting. There was a lot of worry that you weren't there. So I'll send you the notes, because you're the receptacle of all things Mill River.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether or not you like it.
I tried to invite
happens
you.
when you get old?
That got
I believe you
messed
told
up.
us we're stuck with you either way, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Yeah. I think it's going to be out of control.
Plan a big bash. Okay, finance, Stephen is not with us.
I can give a quick finance update. Finance, we talked about the options with positions to better support student needs, and that was a lot of our conversation today. So we talked about bringing that to the board tonight. We also talked about what does the future look like with ed finance. You know, we scheduled our finance meeting hoping that we would know that, and little did we know that that was going to get bumped to veto session kind of timing late June. So we still know nothing. We did talk a little bit about implications of if nothing happened, we're in really reasonable shape. We have surplus funding that we can use to offset the surplus that the state has used to artificially pay down taxes this year. So we are lucky that we have surplus funding that we can mitigate the swing back once that surplus is not available at the state level. A lot of our neighbors don't have that. But we also talked about, yes, we can navigate that with our surplus funding, and we likely want to put a little bit more in our building fund, because it's looking a little more imminent that finance changes are going to happen. If they pass something late June, what they're talking about currently as of, was that this morning? Yeah, what they've been talking about as of this morning was finance change 2 years out. So FY '27, we would still budget the same way we've been budgeting, but then you start thinking, do we want to carry a surplus once we are a merged district? We don't. So we pay the taxes down and we put money in our building fund, and then we see what happens. So that was about the gist of our conversation. We actually didn't spend a ton of time on that because there's still so many unknowns that, you know, we'll get there when we get there. We did set a meeting for August 4th, I believe, thinking that it would be prudent to meet just a little bit earlier than normal, because we will know what FY '27 will look like on August 4th. We should definitely know that. So that is a 6 o'clock hybrid meeting, August 4th.
Brian, just for my own edification, what is our fiscal year? What's it run?
We run July 1 to June 30.
And we're in 26?
We're in FY '25. We've already budgeted for '26.
Good.
So once we hit July 1, we will be in '26. I know it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't line up, but we will start budgeting for '27 during the fall. And that's going to be the interesting one, where we need to read the tea leaves and figure out the legislature, if they were not able to do something, how quickly are they going to do something? I think if they're not able to do something this year, there becomes a heck of a lot of pressure to do something. So we'll see.
Okay, do you want to read the warrants?
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. I would, I don't know which
Okay,
one's true.
I've got payroll warrant dated 6/11/25, one May 23rd, 2025, in the amount of $633,562.53. One for May 30th, 2025, in the amount of $7,520.60. June 6th, 2025, in the amount of $634,453.59, totaling $1,275,536.72. I would ask for a motion to approve payroll warrants as read.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
To approve payroll warrants as read.
Rich is second.
I impressively read it, too.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Okay.
Awesome, thank you. So I've got accounts payable warrant dated 6/11/2025. General fund FY '25 in the amount of $102,468.33. General fund FY '25, another in the amount of $49,332.26. After-school program FY '25, the amount of $1,328.75. Lunch program FY '25, the amount of $109,366.58. Totaling for FY '25, $262,495.92. Also have student activities at Mill River in the amount of $2,202.10. So I would ask for a motion to approve the accounts payable warrant as read.
I'll make a motion to approve the accounts payable warrants as read.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Transact other legal business.
I have other legal business. Brian, we'd like to give you this cake.
Why, thank you.
It's a legal cake.
Why, thank you.
We would just like to say thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
for all
Thank
your
you.
help
I really
and your
appreciate
mentorship.
that. Is
I
that,
don't-
is that like carrot cake?
It is
Oh my
exactly like
gosh,
carrot cake.
Did you know? Did you know? If you ask my daughter Juniper, she would tell you that is my favorite cake.
Well,
And she has probably known that
I
since
must
she
have been
was like
channeling
2,
Juniper's.
and mentions it whenever she can. That is my favorite cake.
well,
That's
thank you very
awesome.
much for being such a
Yeah.
great mentor for all of us.
Yes,
Thank you.
And best of luck with
Thank you.
everything.
It has been an honor and a pleasure.
Very heavy, be careful.
Yeah, I would just like to say, you know,
Collection.
as one of the few members that were here when you were, you know, officially became the superintendent, you were facing a lot of headwinds. You were, you know, coming out of COVID, and during COVID was really hard. And I appreciate all your hard work and all your effort and all the time that spent helping all of us do our jobs better and helping the schools do better. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.
You're the best superintendent I've ever personally met.
We have a joke at home. So my one daughter can say to my other daughter, "You're the best little sister I have." I like that one.
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
Don't have any more kids, you'll be all fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I did have an actual thing I want to bring up too,
Yeah.
and I hate to, I mean, it's not, I can't follow the delicious cake.
I didn't know she was going to get it. I was
No,
gonna
no,
have you-
no,
I was
no,
going
no.
to have you go first, but
Yeah,
that's
it's okay. I would like to address the issue of bus consolidations and busing in Mill River. And I feel like it needs to be brought up at the whole board because I think it's a significant problem. And I feel like I've been talking to people who've been involved in this board and this district for over a decade about this problem, and it has not gotten better, and it's gotten worse. Last week, I think there were 3 routes canceled or consolidated last week, and it is a weekly, if not bi or tri-weekly phone call that parents get. And I personally am fortunate enough that if I need to, I can get my daughter to Wallingford School. My kids do sports at Mill River, so I can usually, there's ASP, so I can get there after work. But I also know that for some families, busing happening in a timely, predictable, reliable way is crucial, and it isn't happening. It's not fair. And I guess I'd like to know what plan there is to increase the reliability of busing in Mill River. Like, I don't want to hear why it's happening, because it's been happening. I want to know what we're doing about it. So seeing the $70,000, I did vote to shift 6,000 out of, but I also noticed there's the maintenance position posted in School Spring, which mentions nothing about bus driving licenses. I mean, one thing I could see would be making that a condition of employment. That within 2 years, if you're a maintenance person in this district, we will pay you, but we require you to get that license. That's an easy thing to do. And it just allows that driver to make more money in overtime.
We've definitely explored that.
But I mean, I feel like it's not in the posting, for example.
We've definitely
So-
tried that in postings and had
just-
no applicants.
And again, as I understand it, districts around us don't have this struggle in the same way that we do. So what are the districts doing?
Don't know if that's
that-
accurate, because I just saw another district cancel the bus route last week and the week before. Our
Okay.
neighboring district.
I just like, then what are the districts that are having less problems doing that we're not? I would like to know what are some concrete actions being taken and what those could look like. And I'd like to see us move that needle away from consolidations.
We can absolutely do that, and we are always willing. You know, we did a lot of brainstorming a couple of years ago, and I'd say every option that anybody presented to us, we explored. Absolutely. And the challenge is that 3 bus drivers are sick. You know, I know you don't want to hear reasons, but I think it's really relevant. You know, when you have 3 sick bus drivers, we don't really have a way to navigate that. You know, I think Connie does a phenomenal job of working with what she's got.
Yeah, I'm not.
And we've put a lot of things in place to try and prevent that. But when push comes to shove and you know, illness happens, that's the part where we get stuck and we run out of options. If somebody has an awesome option for us to try to handle that, we are 100% willing. You know, Connie will run with any idea. Try and make something work.
My experience working in Rutland City, and I'm not maintenance and grounds, I
Yeah.
teach social studies. But I do know that every maintenance worker in Rutland City has their CDL.
And
So that if there is a sick driver,
Yep.
they pull one of those men or
So
women
we-
into that role.
We did something similar to that by hiring Connie, because Connie has her CDL, but she's not a regular driver. When we have had that conversation with our maintenance folks, they've said, thanks, I'll go somewhere else if you make me do that. You know, and we've tried posting as maintenance CDL, and we get no applicants. You know, so I think, I hear you that you'd like to see a plan. We can absolutely share with you what we've tried in the past, because we've definitely had those conversations. We've hosted public sessions and had the community come in and problem solve with us and brainstorm with us, and we run with those ideas and tried to do everything we can, you know. I can't give you that all tonight.
No, I'm not looking for it right now, of course, the way I'm just
I'd like to jump in for one
Yeah.
second
Future.
here. This is agenda building.
Yeah.
We're not building an
Well,
agenda right now.
We are
So-
other legal business. We
I
are
thought we
still
were
under
agenda
other
building.
legal.
No.
business.
Okay,
Other
then,
general business.
never mind, I retract my
But can
comment.
we do this can we add this to a future?
Yeah,
agenda?
Well, clearly, I mean, your
needs to
comments
be.
are totally relevant, we need to add it to the agenda.
I mean, it's an equity issue, quite frankly.
No, actually, well, and
Addressed.
all things like attendance are all linked to this, and attendance is a huge problem.
And I think, you know, I do want to make two really clear points. Connie bends over backwards to do everything she
Yeah, I'm not
possibly
faulting,
can.
personally, I have no, she does a great
And-
job. I'm not
and-
against any person.
And second point, any suggestion that's been brought up, we've absolutely given a good faith attempt to try and follow through on those suggestions.
Can you,
And we're willing, if there are more suggestions, we're absolutely willing to give it a shot.
Well, just a quick one regarding can you put CDL preferred?
We can
Or a bonus
absolutely do
pay.
that.
You know,
Not that it's
or, you know,
required,
within-
'cause that's
Within
different.
4 years of hire, within 2 years of hire, make
Well,
it a condition.
I
that
think having had to deal with special ed, driving special ed kids, I can tell you that it is a roadblock for a lot of people. They do not want the responsibility of transporting kids.
And you know, we do deal with challenges where we've gotten complaints along the way where folks are frustrated that we have some people driving, because when they're driving, it pulls them away from their other responsibilities. Joe Hoffman drives for us. So we've had folks say, well, now he's not available at the start or the end of the day. And I think while we're absolutely open and try to hire those folks, we do have concerns on the other end of, well, now you've got folks who are part-time maintenance and they're not there at the times they need to be there too. I think those are challenging things to sort through. But again, we're willing to explore any recommendation. Absolutely, 100%.
So I have a question. I know we're going to move on,
Yeah.
and I should be the one moving us on. I'm sorry. The consolidated routes,
Mhm.
every kid that would get picked up still gets picked up
Mhm.
and dropped off. There's just a
Yeah.
difference in the timing,
Yeah,
I would
correct.
assume.
And Connie came to the board and said, if you want them all to be consolidated, we'll just do consolidated all the time. We had that conversation, and folks didn't want to do that, because we talked about consistency but weighing against that, well, now bus rides are longer and a little more cramped. At that point in time, it wasn't something the board wanted us to pursue. But if that's something the board wants us to pursue, that would cut down on changes. If they were always consolidated, they'd be the regular routes.
Just be the longer,
Yeah,
there'd be less routes, but they'd be longer.
yeah.
So presumably you have a different pool of drivers and a different pool of backup.
Challenge with that, though, is now you've got a driver you don't need. What do you do with the driver you don't need? And now they're not getting paid because they're not driving.
So maybe the solution is to get rid of the position of bus driver
Yeah,
and make it
yeah.
an umbrella position that's one of your roles.
Like what we were
I
talking
mean,
about with the nurse.
Who wants to drive from 7 in the morning to 9, have all day off,
Yeah.
and then drive again? That's a horrible schedule, like.
Is it possible to do
But our
that?
drivers like that.
Let's kick
Our
it.
drivers do like that schedule, the ones we currently have.
Right.
Okay, so we're on agenda
Agenda
building. Let's put,
Can I just go back to transact other business? I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, yes.
It'll be very brief.
No.
I just want to
It's okay.
put on people's mind about a student rep for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
Yep, now that Bronson's graduated,
I asked
absolutely.
him about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I just want to,
Okay, so student rep.
out there.
Bus drivers.
Does the
And
principal
actually, if Sean's
choose
coming for
that?
personnel,
That would be a great place to
Yep.
bug him about that.
okay,
Absolutely.
Okay, it's on you.
it's on my agenda now.
Okay,
What the
perfect.
heck?
So, agenda building, the next board meeting typically would not have a lot of things on it. So that's one where we've got designated as goal setting, and we had mentioned maybe coming back to our bylaws and redoing our bylaws. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we talked about that board meeting maybe being more of a retreat-style board meeting, and you just have, 45 minutes to do some of that work, because I have nothing else down on my schedule for that meeting. You're going to have a personnel meeting, you'll likely have contracts. I can guarantee you'll have contracts. But then you'll have about a 45-minute chunk of the meeting where you really don't have anything on your agenda. So you could, that homework I sent you about reflecting on board goals, you could start to dive into that in your July meeting, if you wanted to do that.
Silly question, but bus driver issues is also on the agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
just
we can
wanted to
put
make
that
sure.
on there.
And that, because that's the second, that meeting,
Yeah, July 2nd.
July 2nd.
so there'll be a brand new superintendent.
Mhm.
I think we can fill that 45 minutes with that.
You want me to just put board goals on the agenda for that? What do you want me to put on there?
Bylaws.
Bylaws? Okay, just bylaws?
Well, how about just a review? We'll review the board goals, we'll review the bylaws.
Yep.
It'll get us up to speed on.
Yep.
Bylaws and goals. And you can decide how much of either you want to do. And that'll not be an action item because you're not bringing bylaws to, that'll just be a discussion item and you can choose how much of it you want to take on. Okay.
That way, when we meet in August, we'll have the background sort
Yeah.
of laid
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
That wouldn't hurt.
And and it makes sense with Cheryl being there to like start having that
Yeah.
conversation with her about, okay, these are our current goals, and we're gonna
Right.
do some changing.
And Rich, maybe you could, if you don't mind, because you had brought this up, the district quality, what was it called? DQS, I know.
Yes, district quality standards.
standards. And that kind of ties into our goals, and so maybe you could, we can put that down too as
Okay.
part of it. It's
Yeah.
some new state.
You may have resources from the AOE by then. You may. If not, you'll have them before your retreat, which I think would be good to look at.
Yeah, just
Okay.
an introduction, because
Well,
you,
I mean, my experience just was with the VSBA and
right.
Mm-hmm.
Just if you.
small workshop, that, yeah, okay.
If you just share that.
Happy to, okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay,
I'll get that moving.
all right. Executive session.
I do have need for a quick one. Sorry. Under labor relations agreements.
Okay.
Okay. I'll mute the room and we can just sneak over because I think everybo's in person, right? So we can just sneak down the hallway?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
There's it's a
Okay.
lot.
I understand. Sorry, I missed that.
So,
Honestly,
hey,
I
folks,
forgot.
real quick, sorry. We had a motion from Carol to enter executive session, or a motion of a specific finding that premature public knowledge would place the board at a substantial disadvantage. Josh seconded, unanimous. And then Len made a motion to go into executive session. Sarah seconded, unanimous. And we are coming out of executive session at 9:31, no action taken.
Yep. You got it.
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Okay.
By consensus. Okay, thank you, everybody.